Well, to continue the discussion here, we're now joined by Liberal MP Charles Sousa, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, Conservative MP Michael Barrett, Shadow Minister for Ethics and Accountable Government, and Blake Desjarlais, NDP MP and his party's Treasury Board critic. Hello to the three of you.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
Listen, Mr. Sousa, I'm going to start with you here. You know, the Auditor General was looking at the public service with her investigation, but you're in government. Your government is tasked with making decisions and governing with the best interests of Canadians. What responsibility does the Trudeau government bear in all of this?
Well, we absolutely have to take every precaution necessary to protect taxpayer money. And in this case, procurement is a huge part of what government does, over 10,000 contracts over the past year. And certainly we need to find out any wrongdoings that may occur. And that's what it is all about, take corrective action, which we have. We've taken all the recommendations by the Auditor General. We've implemented some of them. We're already implementing others. And it's necessary to hold people accountable for anything that's done inappropriately.
Michael Barrett, how do you respond to that?
Well, look, we have an app that was originally billed at $80,000. Then we thought $54 million. We find out it's at least $60 million. And one of the successful bidders or contractors was able to write the requirements to the exclusion of others, netting nearly $20 million. And that's for a staffing firm. These guys didn't even do any IT work on this IT app. And so it's examples of gross mismanagement by the government. And you know, the Auditor General was very clear that the circumstances at the time were no excuse to throw the rules out the window. Those were her words. And we agree. Canadians need to be able to have confidence that their tax dollars are being handled well. And in this case, it's very clear that they were mishandled. And it looks like preferential treatment was given to a favored company of the government. And when we have Liberal insiders who are benefiting off taxpayers who are lined up at food banks in record numbers, Canadians see that this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost, and after this morning's report, that he's not worth the corruption.
Mr. Desjarlais?
Thanks so much. What we're seeing across the country, I think, is Canadians really falling behind. They're really suffering, whether it's at the grocery till or trying to make rent. Canadians are falling further behind. At the same time, they're witnessing a federal government right now that it has consultants, rich consultants, having their hands deep in the pockets of the government. And as a matter of fact, the Auditor General made a stark claim that this is the worst accounting error she's ever seen, with the lack of documentation that is rife within this issue, or whether it's the actual procurement processes that were undertaken, in this case not undertaken. It's true that Canadians are really struggling right now, and it pains us to see that rich consultants for the better part of this government's history, and even before this government, we've seen Conservative governments participate directly in preferential access for consultants, whether that was the sale of properties and programs in my province like Alberta, where we see Nexon taken over by a Chinese corporation sold by Harper. Whether these processes are good for Canadians is something New Democrats have been staunchly against, allowing private actors access like this to our government's processes, procurement, and assets. It's not right, and it's not okay. New Democrats will call it out when we see it.
Mr. Sousa, how do you respond to that when you hear the allegations of ties with Liberal connections, with Liberal consultants? How do you answer that?
Yeah, well, they're obviously both the Ombudsman and the Auditor General didn't reference any connection between Liberal insiders or elected officials. All of this is done through the bureaucrats, and submissions were being made. But it's also interesting to note that no one got paid for work that was not done. And that was very clear as well. So furthermore, during that period of time, and there's no excuse for not instituting proper procedures, but during that very urgent period of time, we provided CEBA loans to support small businesses. We were providing CERBA to provide support for those that are unemployed or being at risk of unemployment. We were providing a number of supports during the pandemic, which the opposition and the Conservatives opposed at every turn. We needed to take precautions to protect the interests of Canadians. That's what we did. And we have to make certain as we go forward that we don't preclude the work that's necessary to ensure that those protections are made. But we have to be accountable, we have to be transparent, and we are just as upset as anybody in terms of value for money and what was invested to protect our citizens in Canada. So we took those steps, and we're taking corrective measures as well.
Okay, but you're referencing other programs here. What happened to the guardrails with the ArriveCan app? If the others were able to be watched over by your government, why not this app?
Well, that's my point. A lot of messages was taken, things were expedited much too quickly, and things were sped through as a result of the pandemic. A lot of urgent matters were being done at the same time. Like, she also made reference, the auditor, that the approaches that were there in place would have cost so much more. And it was necessary to take an e-based approach, which is what the ArriveCan was all about. And furthermore, the practice of using contractors and subcontractors to do the work is not uncommon. And the Auditor General also noted that we didn't have the skills or the resources in-house to enable that to be done. So it was important for us to expedite them quickly, but it's critically important to have people accountable. And if there's any wrongdoing, they will be held to account.
Okay, Mr. Barrett, let me pick up on that point, because we were in the midst of the emergency portion of the pandemic. Decisions were being made quickly, and at the end of the day, dollar figure aside, this app was delivered quickly when you compare it to other contracts given out by the government.
Well, first of all, the Auditor General herself said very clearly that pandemic or not, it's never acceptable to throw the rules out the window. So that's the first thing. Next, this was not effective delivery when we had more than 10,000 people that were wrongly forced in quarantine, house arrest under threat of jail if they left their homes because of the failures of this app. To say nothing of the fact that some of the very same contractors who were working on this app are under RCP investigation because of their contracting with the federal government. So this isn't a matter of, well, this was just, a one-off. We're seeing in different areas with different contracts. Now we have RCMP investigations. The procurement ombudsman, of course, has said that the government's not doing its due diligence. And in this case, COVID was not an excuse for what was done here. And the Canadian public suffered. We also learned that people that worked on the app, contrary to what the officials said, didn't have the necessary security clearance to work on an app that dealt with people's personal and biometric data. So across the board, this is a failure. The Auditor General was shocked. It was glaring, the mismanagement, is how she described it. And there needs to be accountability. The government says that they want to be accountable. Well, ministerial accountability usually sees a change around the cabinet table. The only person who hasn't moved in the musical chairs that they've initiated is the Prime Minister, and he's the one who needs to be held responsible for these failures.
Mr. Desjarlais, as we hear that from Mr. Barrett, what does accountability look like to you?
I think accountability has to be core to the problem here. This isn't just a one-off. This isn't a situation where we've seen one instance of a private actor taking our public processes, our public coffers, and taxpayers writ large for granted. We've seen this time and time and time again. We need to ensure, and it was clear by the Auditor General, that we didn't have the in-house capabilities of doing this work. That begs the question as to when service cuts happen to our public sector, this is the direct impact. It puts at risk our ability to make certain that we have programs that protect Canadians, that they're, one, safe, affordable, and actually ones they can count on. The alternative is to continue to cut the public service down and to continue to make such horrific cuts that the only option for a government is to then look at outsourcing. When we do that, these kinds of vulnerabilities become very transparent, whether it's this instance or the Phoenix pay system, for example. The Phoenix pay system, when the Conservatives brought that in through a private contract, we're still in that mess today. And so I just don't buy it when we hear that the solution is just to implement a few Band-Aid solutions here, there, and everywhere, when the root of the rot is deep with the connection between how private entities see the government as a cash cow, and they can see it because they have access to, one, the requirements to the contracts, like we've seen in the Auditor General statements today, where we had a company like GC Strategies directly write the requirements for their own bid after they were given 3 non-competition bids. This is inappropriate. Canadians deserve better, taxpayers deserve better, and we need politicians to call out the real issue, which is the fact that private companies continue to prey on the public service and continue to prey on our coffers At the same time, we witness governments cut services like IT that are extremely valuable in the modern in the 21st century, and you'd think that governments across the country would be investing in their public service. But what we're seeing by this government and the Treasury Board, I'm the Treasury Board critic for Minister Anand, is actually cuts. These cuts will directly translate to more mismanagement, less transparency, and more problems for Canadians.
You know, Mr. Sousa, I'm wondering what accountability looks like to you, because at the end of the day, again, this is happening under your government's watch. What do you do to say that you have taken accountability in any form and to restore public confidence in the contracts and the programs that your government pursues?
It's a critical question because of the 10,000 contracts that are done annually, these handful of contracts that were assembled and expedited much too quickly weren't taking the proper steps as mentioned. And we are very concerned about that outcome. So we want to make certain that that doesn't repeat itself. So we have already taken a number of positions. We've stopped the delegation authorities. We've instituted an eBay system, so all the capture of those contracts are brought under the one umbrella that's easily accessible. And more importantly, we're making those that are making the bids, they have to now account for why it costs the money it costs, so that we ensure we understand what we're buying. And be clear, the contracting and the subcontracting mechanism that's in play is what's used across industries, across other governments, across previous governments. The same individual that we're talking about that's running GC Strategies was also a prime contractor for the previous Conservative government. We have to take proper steps to ensure that no one is abusing the system. And during this period of time, what was really at risk is cross-border trade. Had the ArriveCan not come into place, the steps that we took enabled us to have much greater trade. That would have cost us billions of dollars, and it was essential to bring it forward.
Mr. Barrett and Mr. Desjarlais, I'm going to give you each 30 seconds to respond to that. Mr. Barrett.
Look, this, we're going to see excuses from the government. The Auditor General outlined failures today. This is where we have Liberal insiders, we have senior bureaucrats. They're doing booze tastings and going out for luxurious dinners while Canadians are struggling, and the government is allowing insiders to have access to these lucrative contracts. They're ballooning both contracting and the public service at the same time. That dog doesn't hunt. This government needs to be accountable for the waste, mismanagement, and scandal that lies at Justin Trudeau's feet.
Quick last word to you, Mr. Desjarlais.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is unfair for Canadians. Canadians are right now bearing the cost of living crisis almost all on their own. Simultaneous to that, we have government taking directly from them and putting in the pockets of rich consultants. This has been a tradition of this place for many, many decades. It's time to get rid of the rot. It's time to get rid of the private consultants, and it's time to start working for Canadians.
Okay. Thank you very much for the time. Sorry that we've run out. Mr. Sousa, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Desjarlais, have a good evening.
Thank you.